Okay, good morning, everybody. Can everybody see my screen? I love that I
Yes.
can see y'all nod. That makes this so much easier. Um, so I'm Lindsay Bradford. I manage the LA4 program for the Department of Education, and I've talked to some of you, and I know we have some new faces out there, so that's exciting. What we're going to cover today is an overview of what your enrollment attendance reporting will look like for 2020, 2021, and the requirements for payment, claiming, as well as the information that we've sent out some guidance on what virtual learning will look like and the requirements for payment if you have children who are doing virtual learning. So we'll just kind of cover that again in case you may have missed it before. Okay, so I want to just kind of reiterate something that we sent out last year that I want to make sure everybody's clear on. Last year in 2019, 2020, the way that LA4 funds were received from another state agency shifted, which required the Department of Education to change the administration of funds from a grant allocation to a services agreement. Funds supporting LA4 were formerly identified as TANF funds, but when they are received within the Department of Education, they lose their federal identity as a result of this new service agreement, according to federal regulations. And so what this means for you is that the portion of LA4 funds that were previously identified as TANF dollars should now be identified within your district and within your district reporting as state dollars, just like any other state revenue portion of funding allotments that you receive for services. So when you complete your AFR at the end of the year, you will use these key punches, which we've identified on this slide, to report your LA4 money. You used to use some different coding for TANF funds, but you will not use that coding this year. You will strictly use that key punch code that's identified in that second bullet. The process for payments will look the same this year as it did last year. You will not have to submit a budget through EGMS to the department for review. School systems will continue to submit detailed enrollment and attendance information for your LA4 children only monthly via the LA4 attendance and reporting claim form. These funds will be paid on a per child basis. This allows you to expend funds before having approval on a budget. So you won't have to wait for us to approve a budget before you're able to go ahead and start spending your funds. Payments will be made monthly following complete submission of enrollment and attendance reports. I know last year we made an effort to do payments quarterly, but as we know, last year sort of got derailed a little bit. And so this year we've decided to just issue monthly payments. Now, I will say that if you are in the group of districts who still receive the flow through TANF funds, which should now be identified as state funds, you will receive 2 payments per month for your LA4 children. And if you only receive the state general funds that are allocated or appropriated to the department, then you will receive 1 payment per month. And we will send out information on those allocations so that you know what to expect. And then, as I mentioned, you will still report your expenditure data on the AFR. We released your pre-K program assurances on the 10th. They are due tomorrow. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware that you should have received those in your email. If you did not receive the assurances to submit to us, please let me know and I'll get you a copy as soon as possible. In addition to the regular assurances, we've added some caveats that you will ensure that accurate enrollment attendance information are kept for each child. that you must submit monthly enrollment and attendance reports for each child funded with LA4 funds by the date outlined on the reporting timelines, and failure to submit timely data may result in forfeiture of payment that cannot be recouped. The deadlines that we have been given were not department set deadlines. They've been set by another agency, and so we cannot grant waivers for the submission deadlines. The school systems will acknowledge that the monthly prorate child is payable contingent on the child attending 74% of the scheduled school calendar days in a month. And for children who do not meet the 74% requirement, payments will be made based on funding availability. But as you know, last year in 2019-2020, we were able to fund not only your children who met the 74%, but also the children who did not. And so if we do have funding availability to do that again this year, we will make every effort to do that. And another note is that excused absences do not count against a child's monthly attendance percentage. If a child has an excusable absence, then those days are not counted as absences for payment purposes. And they'll be, as you know, documented on your attendance report in a very specific way. And we consider excused absences anything that meets your district's definition of an excused absence. So if your district only allows doctor's excuses, then that's what we will consider. However, some places will allow an excused absence for a funeral or whatever the case may be. So whatever your district's definition of an excused absence is what we will recognize.
Hey, Lindsay, we have a couple questions in the chat. Could you just give us a brief refresher on how to submit the assurances?
Yes, so the assurances were sent out to you in a fillable PDF. And the signature is an electronic signature, so you should just be able to click on the signature line and it will enter your name. And then there is a submit button at the bottom of the form that once you click that submit button, it should trigger an email box to pull up that will send it directly to my email. And I do also have some instructions on that. If you have not ever set up an electronic signature before, I have some instructions that I can send out. So if you need that, please send me an email and I'm happy to get that to you.
Great, thanks. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you are familiar with this enrollment and attendance form. We've made some changes to it. Both in formatting and in function. So I want to go through it with you so that you're really clear on what the expectation is. And I'm actually going to, let me go back here just a second. I am actually going to share my screen again here so that you can see exactly what it's going to look like when you enter your attendance. We have, first of all, moved the signature box and the reimbursement calculations to the top of the page, which just makes a lot more sense for everyone. And another thing that we have done is we have automated a lot of the function within the spreadsheet. So when you're entering the information, you'll see that you have a drop down for these 4 options, which we'll go through in just a minute. If anything is entered other than one of these 4 options, it will not allow you to enter the information. So you'll have a C for days that your school district is closed or your school is closed. The 0 indicates an absence, unexcused. A 1 indicates the child is present. And the hyphen indicates that that is a date that the child was not actually enrolled. And we're going to go through each of those in detail in just a second. So you'll have the drop down options. And then once you've entered the information, let me go back to this presentation. It will calculate everything for you automatically. And then you'll be able to see, once you've entered the information, which of those children have met the attendance requirement and which ones have not. it will highlight those children who have not in red. So you'll be able to look at it, and if you want to go back and just double check your records, if you feel like there's an error, you'll have the opportunity to do that. So let's go through these options individually, just to make sure everybody is clear on what each one of these things mean. So any days that your school or district is closed must be identified with that capital C. It will not accept a lowercase c. As I mentioned, if it's not on the drop down, it will not accept it. So you will complete the child's ID number and their name information. We are asking that you, again, only enter the first initial of their first name and the first two initials of their last name. And these instructions are, these instructions are also on this instruction tab on the template, very detailed. So while it may not be in great detail on these slides, it is in great detail on the actual template. So you're going to enter the first initial of the child's first name and the first two initials of the child's last name. And that's all the information that we're asking you for. Anything further gets us into a PII, can of worms, that we would prefer not to open. So then each day that the child is present, you will mark with the number 1 from your drop down. Days when the child is absent, unexcused absence, you should mark that with the 0. And any days where the child has an excused absence should be indicated with the number 1 and that day highlighted in yellow, as you did last year. And all excuses should be kept on file for monitoring and audit purposes. And I'm going to pause just for a second to see, Meredith, if there are any other questions in the chat box so far. Okay, then we'll keep going. Okay, so this is where the little hyphen comes into play. If you have children who start late, so let's say they've moved from out of town and they start in the middle of the month, they must attend 74% of their scheduled school days in order to be eligible for payment. So for example, Mary starts school on October 21st. That's her first day of school. She must attend 5 days to meet the attendance requirement. Days a child is not enrolled should be identified with a hyphen by selecting the dash from the drop-down. And please note, this is really important to note because we saw a lot of this last year. The hyphen does not indicate a school closure or an absence. It only identifies the days that a child is not enrolled in your school. So if they've started late or they've dropped for whatever reason, that is what the hyphen indicates. And there's an example of that on the template for the child whose listed number is 444444, which when you get your template, you'll be able to see that. And then children who disenroll for any reason must meet the full 74% of the scheduled school days requirement in order to be reimbursed. So if Johnny's family relocates to Texas and his last day of school is October 11th, he only attended 7 days, which was 33%. So he does not meet the requirement. However, Charles's last day was October 25th. Since he attended 17 days, he did meet the requirement and is eligible for payment. So here's the example tab. You can see here, Mary did not start school until the 21st. She attended 7 days. She was required to attend 5. So she met her attendance, 100% of her attendance requirement. Johnny moved and left school on the 11th, and he did not attend any more days. And so his required number of days would have been 16, but since he only attended 7, he does not meet the attendance requirement. And then Charles, who attended until the 25th, does meet the attendance requirement because he attended 17 days where the requirement was 16. Okay, some important items to remember. Your completed reports are due by the close of business on the 10th of each month. As I mentioned, this is not a negotiable deadline and we are unable to grant extensions. So if you fail to submit your report by the deadline, there's a risk of non-payment for services that month. As I'm doing the reviews, I will absolutely reach out to you if I see that your report has not been signed or has not been completed. We definitely don't want to have anybody miss out on receiving their payment. So we will be in contact with you if we see that it has not been submitted, but we want to make sure that everybody understands that that deadline of the 10th is not, it's non-negotiable. Please ensure that you are only reporting attendance information for children who are eligible for and coded in SIS as LA4 children. We will no longer, as you know, we do not collect information on any of the other funding sources as we have in the past. We look at that during the child count, but we don't look at it on a monthly basis. And then your report is considered submitted when the signature has been affixed to the Google Doc. So if I'm looking at your report and all of the data has been entered, but there's no signature, then I do not consider that report complete or submitted. Again, I will reach out to you if it looks like it should be completed, but there's just no signature. But a present signature does indicate that we can begin our review process and close out that month for edits. So if you're still adding data, please do not sign it until you are finished. Because again, a signature triggers our ability to go in and complete our review.
Lindsay, it seems like a couple of people have had issues with the signature when they are attempting to do the electronic signature, they get kicked out. Is it possible to do individual checks on a parish?
Are we talking about assurances or are we talking about the signature on the template?
It looks like the signature on the template.
The signature on the template, let me pull it back up.
Oh, no, just kidding, assurance.
Okay. Yeah, if for some reason the electronic signature does not work for you, I know in some places they have really crazy rules about some of these things. They have firewalls that block certain things. If for some reason the signature does not work for you, you are absolutely more than welcome to print it out and sign it and scan it back to me. That's not a problem. And the signature, I will go ahead and mention this, the signature on the template, let me go back. I have too many screens going at once. The signature on the template is just a type-in box. So you don't have to paste an actual signature in, you just type your name and that's all, and the date, and that's all that we ask for. So there's no special tricks to this signature either.
Great.
Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about what 2020, 2021 will look like for LA4 payment in this sort of unknown world of virtual school. We are hoping that everyone is considering various models for instruction and different options for families and that your plans are coming together. You may have seen a survey that we released on the 10th that asked you to sort of give us an overview of your plan. Again, if you did not see that email, I'm happy to send it to you. But you should have a plan in place that includes high quality curriculum, instruction, assessment, and professional development across grade levels and content areas, as well as a strategic communications plan for family engagement. Your school system should prepare for at least 3 possible scenarios: traditional, hybrid, and virtual. And all scenarios should include daily attendance for staff and students. So for schools and systems considering a hybrid model, it may be helpful to consider prioritizing younger grades for in-person instruction, which may help meet the childcare needs of families with younger school-age children and support developmentally appropriate instruction for younger ages. So if your district is considering having some of your older grades do all virtual, you may take into consideration allowing those younger children to actually come physically to school if that's an option that their families are comfortable with. So in addition to the Strong Start guidelines and the reopening guidelines and resources, we developed a set of very specific requirements for implementation of publicly funded virtual pre-K. So in the case of school closures, LA4 programs that meet the following requirements will continue to be funded. And not only school closures, if you're opting to do a virtual pre-K format, these 4 bullet points are the 4 required components in order to be eligible for payment for your LA4 classes. So your lead teacher, you will still have to have a lead teacher that meets all certification criteria. You should ensure that children